For the past few months or so, there's been non-stop speculation about how the incoming US President Donald Trump might try to expand America's borders. In December, Trump suggested that Canada should become the 51st state of America, told a crowd of supporters that he wanted to take back control of the Panama Canal, and posted on Truth Social that the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity. Most commentators originally ignored Trump's comments, dismissing them either as a joke or belligerent but empty rhetoric. But on Tuesday, Trump gave an astonishing press conference at Mar-a-Lago, where he refused to rule out using military force to take Greenland and the Panama Canal, threatened very high tariffs against Denmark unless they agreed to give up Greenland, and threatened to use, quote, economic force to make Canada a US state. This came a few hours after a series of freewheeling posts over on Truth Social, where Trump claimed that a US-Canada merger would better guarantee Canadian security, and pledged to, quote, make Greenland great again. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Trump's plans to expand the US and whether they could actually happen. Explore which world leaders are winning and which are losing every week with our new podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard. Find it over on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. Straight off the bat, we should say that the idea that Canada is going to become a US state anytime soon is nonsense. There is zero appetite for it, and the idea that Trump could use tariffs to convince Canadians otherwise is, well, silly. Entertainingly, the only political party to support the idea, a Quebec party called Party 51, won 0.02% of the vote at the 2022 Quebec general election, and has actually performed worse than the satirical Rhinoceros Party, which proposes annexing the US instead. Similarly, it's very hard to see Trump taking back control of the Panama Canal. For those of you who don't know, the canal was built and controlled by the US in the early 20th century, before Jimmy Carter decided to start handing it back to Panama in 1977. Carter's Republican successors, including Ronald Reagan, weren't too keen on the deal because of the canal's vital importance for American maritime trade. But it went ahead anyway, and in 1999, the canal was fully handed over, although the US did get Panama to sign a so-called neutrality treaty, which guarantees fair access for all nations and non-discriminatory tolls, as well as giving the US the right to intervene militarily if this neutrality is threatened. Trump is presumably using talk of military action to try and pressure Panama into reducing its toll rates. But it's worth saying that A, they're already pretty low by international standards, B, it's not really a credible threat, and C, while any decrease would admittedly help the US, given it's the biggest user of the canal, it would also benefit China, which is now the second biggest user. On this note, Trump is probably worried about the warming relations between China and Panama. While Chinese troops don't actually operate the canal, as Trump claimed on Christmas, it's true that Panama and China have been growing closer, as evidenced by Panama's decision to cut ties with Taiwan in favor of China, and a Hong Kong company operates the two ports on either end of the canal. Nonetheless, the obvious risk here is that Trump's bellicose rhetoric actually pushes Panama away from the US and closer to China. This leaves Greenland, which is currently an autonomous part of Denmark, sitting just northeast of Canada, with a population of about 55,000 people. Unlike the idea of annexing Canada or the Panama Canal, the US taking over Greenland is an idea that many of Trump's predecessors have flirted with. In the 1860s, America opened negotiations with Denmark to buy both Greenland and Iceland, and in 1910, the US offered Mindanao and Palawan, two islands in the Philippines, to Denmark as a trade for Greenland, suggesting that Denmark could then trade the islands with Germany for northern Schleswig. America only properly recognized Denmark's claim to the territory in 1917, during World War I, as a precondition for America's purchase of the Danish West Indies. And in World War II, American troops occupied the territory for security reasons. Denmark turned down another offer to buy Greenland in 1946, this time for $100 million, or roughly $1 billion today. But in 1951, the Danes signed an agreement, essentially giving the US the right and responsibility to defend the territory. America's strategic interest in Greenland declined markedly after the Cold War, but has increased again in recent years, thanks to an uptick in geopolitical tensions between the US, Russia, and China, especially around the Arctic. Given Greenland's strategic position in the North Atlantic, it has the potential to play a vital role supporting American military efforts in tracking Russian submarines and guarding against missile launches from Russia and China towards the US mainland, as well as resisting any attempts by foreign powers to militarize the Arctic. Trump actually first floated the idea back in August 2019 and kicked off a diplomatic furore by tweeting a photoshopped image of a Trump hotel in the middle of a Greenlandic village, with Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, dismissing Trump's proposal as absurd. He's returned to it, though, in the past few months, promising in multiple posts on Truth Social to make Greenland great again, and then threatening Denmark with very high tariffs if they didn't hand it over. But Trump's threats here might be misdirected, given that, as we explained in another video over on TLDR EU, Greenland might actually become independent relatively soon anyway. Pro-independence parties won 80% of the vote at the last election, and in his New Year's address, Greenland's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, formally called for independence from Denmark. Now, you might think this would make it easier for Trump to get his hands on it. After all, Greenland's economy will struggle without its annual $500 million grant from Denmark, and Trump could offer economic support or threaten to withdraw America's de facto security guarantee to coerce a newly independent Greenland to join the US. However, Greenland's current government has made it clear they're not keen, with Frederiksen insisting last month that we are not for sale, and we must not lose our long struggle for freedom. Finally, the last place worth mentioning in this video is Mexico. While Trump didn't talk about Mexico in Tuesday's press conference, there have been numerous reports that the incoming Trump administration is considering a soft invasion of northern Mexico to tackle the violent drug cartels that de facto control the territory. Obviously, any military action without the consent of the Mexican government, which is very much against the idea, would be a drastic violation of international law. But there's also a risk that, unless US forces were immediately successful in their objectives, the US might either be forced to temporarily occupy parts of northern Mexico or create a so-called buffer zone. All in all, while a substantial change to America's borders in Trump's second term still feels unlikely, it's not impossible, especially when it comes to Greenland and Mexico. Even if it doesn't happen, Trump's willingness to threaten other countries' territorial integrity, and even that of its nominal allies, suggests his second term will be geopolitically bumpy. We're heading into 2025 with a whole new group of politicians, business leaders, and influential people. The question is, though, who will come out on top? Who is the world's most influential person? That's what we're trying to find out with our most influential person list, which we need your help with. If you head to the link in the description, you can vote for your own personal top 10, helping to shape our overall ranking. Your vote is super important, and voting closes on January the 15th, so do your democratic duty and cast your ballot for the world's most influential person. Also, if you're wondering why we're doing this, it's for the next issue of our magazine, Too Long. That's because the next issue will contain the entire list, as well as fascinating articles about the top 25. Those won't just be boring profiles about each of the people either. There'll be interesting stories about who these people really are, where their power truly resides, and how they wield their influence. If you want to pre-order a copy of the magazine now, then you can click the link in the description to pick up a copy. Oh, and if you pick up a premium copy of the magazine, you'll also get access to our internal awards ceremony, where the team will first learn and react to your votes live. Plus, you'll get to watch TLDR team members sit down to discuss their lists, fight it out, and try to agree for once. You'll also get access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, and get your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine. Anyway, find out more, cast your vote, or order a copy by clicking the various links in the description.